The stagecoach door slammed, its iron hinges screaming in the desert heat. Dust rolled thick across Red Hollow's main road, swallowing the outlines of boots and skirts as a woman stepped down. Her hands clutched a flour sack, white powder streaking her knuckles. A scar cut across her cheek, like a pale slash of lightning. Men leaned from the saloon porch, spitting tobacco into the street. Their eyes tracked the way coyotes track a lone calf. The woman's boots sank into the dirt, as though the ground resisted her. She didn't speak, only walked past them with the slow certainty of one who'd walked through worse. From a far end of the street, Samuel Braddock's shadow stretched long, hat brim bent low against the sun. He'd come because word traveled faster than dust in Red Hollow. His daughter's hand tugged weakly at his, small fingers barely strong enough to hold. She coughed once, thin and rattling, and Samuel's jaw locked tighter. The woman stopped before him. She shifted the flour sack higher against her hip. Her eyes were sharp, dark, measuring him the way a blacksmith measures iron before the hammer falls. "You're Braddock," she said, her voice dry as a wind. Samuel gave one short nod. "You'll bake?" he asked. "I'll bake." The bargain was struck without another word. She followed him across the road, the town stairs crawling over her back. The sheriff's badge glinted from a chair outside the office, but the man behind it didn't rise, only watched. At the ranch house, the door creaked open on hinges worn by years of storms. Inside, silence pressed down heavier than the sun outside. The hearth stood cold, pan stacked, the table bare. Samuel set his daughter into a chair, her legs dangling, eyes wide and glassy. The woman laid her flour sack on the table. Without pause, she drew out a tin of yeast, a jar of salt, and began working. Her hands knew the rhythm. Scoop, pour, knead. The slap of dough echoed in the hollow kitchen, a sound like heartbeats returning to a long-dead room. Ellie leaned forward, her voice no louder than a whisper. "What are you making?" The woman did not answer at first. She pressed her palm flat against the dough, leaned into it with weight, shoulders tight beneath her dress. Then softer, bread, and something better. She pinched off a piece of dough, rolled it thin between her palms, twisted it into the shape of a bird, set it on the table before Ellie. The child blinked once, then smiled, small but real. Samuel's eyes, watching from the doorway, shifted. The scarred woman worked without looking up, yet the air in the room was different, warmer, as if the hearth had been lit, though no fire burned yet. Outside, wind rattled shutters. Inside, the first loaf began to rise. Hoofbeats rolled like distant thunder, shaking dust from the rafters. Samuel tightened the bridle on his mare, his hands working fast, rough. The cattle in the far pasture stirred, lowing uneasy, as though they smelled wolves on the wind. On the ridge above Red Hollow, torches flickered against the darkening sky. Men whispered the name Maddox in the saloon, voices breaking over it like dry sticks. At the sheriff's office, the badge lay tossed on the desk, whiskey glass half drained beside it. The man himself slumped, head in his arms, too heavy with drink to rise. Back at the ranch, Ellie coughed under her blanket, sweat shining on her small face. Miriam pressed a cool cloth to the child's forehead, her brow furrowed, lips moving in some whispered prayer. She crushed herbs between her fingers, the sharp scent filling the air, bitter and clean. Samuel stood in the doorway, rifle leaning against his shoulder. His voice came low, hard. "The Maddox gang's close." "You hear?" "I hear," she answered, wringing the cloth again. Her hands never trembled. "You've seen them before?" Her gaze lifted, steady as stone. "I've seen fire. That's enough." Ellie stirred, reaching weakly toward Miriam. She caught the girl's hand and held it firm. Samuel watched, his jaw clenched, something old and unspoken moving in his chest. By morning, the fever broke. Ellie's eyes fluttered open, her lips cracked but smiling faintly. Miriam smoothed her hair back, the lines of worry softening at last. Samuel turned away, clearing his throat into the silence. But peace did not last. In town, whispers sharpened like knives. A man on the porch spat at the dirt, muttering, "That scarred woman, she's one of them. Rode with Maddox years back." Others nodded. suspicion spreading faster than fire in dry brush. That night, Samuel confronted her. The lantern light burned low, shadows deep against the walls. "You tell me true," he said, voice rough. "Who are you, and why does Red Hollow whisper your name?" Miriam's hand stilled. For a moment, the only sound was the slow tick of the clock on the mantel. Then she lifted her chin, eyes burning in the half-dark. "I buried my past once," she said. "But the past, it knows how to dig." From a window, Samuel saw movement on the far hills. The glow of campfires scattered like angry eyes across the desert. His grip on the rifle tightened until his knuckles whitened. The storm had come. Maddox's riders were watching, waiting. And inside the house, silence stretched thick, broken only by the sound of Ellie's soft breathing and the slow rise of wind against the shutters. Torches blazed along the ridge, their flames tossing shadows across the desert floor. Gunmetal glinted in the moonlight as riders shifted in their saddles, the sound of spurs and snorts carrying down into Red Hollow. Samuel braced his rifle against the window frame, eyes fixed on the horizon. His breath came shallow, slow, like a man listening for the end. Behind him, the kitchen was dark, save for the faint orange glow of coals in the stove. Miriam moved without a word. She set aside the apron she had worn like armor, folded it neatly, and reached for the small iron box she always kept close. The lock clicked open. The sound was sharp, final. Silver gleamed. 2 revolvers, polished smooth, engraved with roses that caught the light. The weight of them in her hands broke the silence like thunder. Samuel turned. His voice came rough, almost breaking. "What in God's name?" Miriam strapped the gun belt low on her hips, movement steady, practiced. She did not meet his eyes until the buckles were fastened. When she did, her gaze was flint. "I'll not let him take this child," she said. From the bed, Ellie stirred, her small voice cutting through the heavy air. "Miss Miriam?" The woman's hand softened as she brushed Ellie's hair back, but her shoulders stayed iron. She whispered something Samuel couldn't hear, a promise or prayer, then rose again. Outside, hooves pounded closer. The gang's laughter cracked like whips across the night. A bullet shattered the silence, splintering the church's steeple in town. Women screamed. Men ducked low behind doors, clutching rifles with shaking hands. The sheriff stumbled into the street, pistol loose in his grip. His knees buckled before he reached the hitching post. The people of Red Hollow watched from windows, their faces pale in the lamplight, waiting for someone, anyone, to stand. Miriam stepped out first. Her boot struck the porch board with sound like a drumbeat. Samuel followed, rifle tight in his grip, though his eyes stayed on her. The gang drew up in a half-circle, torches throwing their grinning faces into firelight. At the center sat Cole Maddox, scarred and smirking, his hat tipped back. His gaze landed on Miriam, and his grin widened. "Well," he drawled, voice carrying sharp across the street, "the prodigal bird flies home." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Samuel froze. Miriam stood tall, her revolvers hanging at her sides, silver glinting like moonlight. Her voice cut through the night, low and steady. "You burned my home, Cole. You won't burn this one." The torches hissed in the wind. The gang shifted restlessly in their saddles, and the town of Red Hollow held its breath. The first shot cracked the night wide open. Glass shattered, horses screamed, and the streets of Red Hollow exploded with gunfire. Sparks leapt from rifles, lighting the dust like falling stars. Miriam's revolvers barked in both hands, silver flashing in rhythm with her breath. Men dropped from their saddles, torches tumbling to the dirt. Samuel's rifle roared from the porch, covering her flank, his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The townsfolk, who had hidden in doorways, found their courage in the storm. Windows flew open, barrels pushed through, and bullets poured into the night. Maddox's gang, once wolves, now flinched like cattle under the lash. But Cole Maddox rode straight through the fire, black hat low, his laughter cutting across the chaos. His pistol barked, the bullet grazing Miriam's shoulder, spinning her sideways. She caught herself, teeth bared, smoke rising from her guns. Their eyes locked through the haze. Brother, sister, blood bound by ashes. He swung down from his horse, boots striking hard against the dirt. "You should have stayed buried, Rosa." Miriam's voice came like steel drawn from its sheath. "And leave the child to you?" "No." They circled in the dust, torches hissing around them. Townsfolk silent now, holding their breath as though the whole desert leaned in to watch. Cole's grin split wide. "Hungry?" Miriam's fingers twitched once at her side. The world hung still. Then, thunder. 2 shots cracked as one. Cole staggered, eyes wide, pistol falling useless into the dirt. Blood bloomed dark across his vest. He swayed, lips parting as though to speak, then dropped into the dust that had waited for him all along. Miriam stood motionless, smoke curling from her barrel. Only when the last torch guttered out did she lower her guns. Silence pressed heavy. The townsfolk crept forward, faces pale in the starlight, staring not at Cole but at her. The widow, the baker, the ghost who had carried fire in her hands all along. Samuel stepped toward her, rifle still hot, his breath ragged. He looked at Ellie, safe in the doorway, clutching the bird-shaped bread still hard in her hand. Then back at Miriam. His eyes softened, something unspoken breaking free at last. Days later, the ranch smelled of bread again. Ellie laughed, chasing sunbeams across the kitchen floor. Miriam knelt beside the hearth, sleeves rolled, scar catching the light. Samuel stood quiet behind her, a small silver ring trembling between his fingers. No words, just the sound of the wind through the shutters, the crackle of fire, and his hand offering hers something that was not payment, nor debt but promise. And so, as the old storyteller would tell it, the rancher hired her to bake bread, but her kindness to his child made him give her a ring instead. And that, children, is how Red Hollow learned that sometimes the sharpest gunslinger wears an apron, and the fiercest fire is not in powder and steel, but in the warmth of bread shared at a table.